Pouring your morning brew using the identical beans, the exact same machine, and the very scoop you have relied on for years, you realize something has shifted recently. The coffee has begun to taste significantly diminished. It is not overly bitter like it used to be, nor is it deep. It is just thinner and flatter, as if someone reached over and secretly turned down the volume on your mug. You are not imagining this change. The first astonishing revelation, the pivot upon which this entire video rests, is that the reason your coffee tastes so dull is not due to the beans themselves, nor is it truly a problem with your tongue. The genuine culprit resides one step upstream from your mouth in a spot almost nobody ever thinks to inspect. Most individuals blame one of three factors when their coffee starts tasting flat. They blame the coffee itself, so they switch to a darker roast. They blame the equipment, so they descale it. Or they simply shrug and assume their palate is worn out, much like an old key that wears smooth and no longer turns the lock. That third assumption is the insidious one. It is the belief that causes people to stop trying, and it is the exact idea I want to dismantle with you today because it is completely inaccurate. Your sense of taste is not a key wearing smooth over time. Let me demonstrate what is actually occurring by starting with the tongue itself. You possess roughly 10,000 taste buds, and they are located primarily inside the tiny raised bumps on your tongue known as papillae, which is merely the medical term for those visible bumps in the mirror. The mushroom-shaped bumps near the front, called fungiform papillae, contain many of the taste buds that are critical for daily flavor perception. Here is the piece of information almost no one is ever told. Those taste buds are not permanent fixtures on your tongue. They are not like teeth that are installed once and then slowly ground down over a lifetime. In reality, the cells inside a taste bud are among the most rapidly renewing cells in your entire body. Researchers, tracing back to foundational studies by Beidler and Smallman in 1965 and verified numerous times since, estimate that the average taste cell survives for only about 10 to 14 days before dying off. It is then replaced by a completely new cell generated from the tissue resting underneath. Let that sink in for a moment. Every couple of weeks, you cultivate an entirely fresh set of taste cells. Look at it through this analogy. Your gustatory system is not a machine that wears down, but rather a small overnight bakery. The ovens, representing the buds, bake a fresh batch of bread every 2 weeks or so, operating all day and all night throughout your entire life. The ovens themselves are remarkably durable and keep running continuously. What the bakery truly relies upon is the loading dock at the back where the raw ingredients arrive. As long as those deliveries keep showing up, the bread emerges full and rich. Hold on to that image because we are going to return to that loading dock later, as that is where this entire mystery ultimately concludes. First, let us examine one more link in the chain, because not every oven in this bakery operates identically. Here's a fact that surprises even those who know a bit of biology. The various cells inside a single taste bud do not all share the same lifespan. A study published in the journal PLOS1 in 2013 tracked these distinct cell types individually. The receptor cells responsible for detecting sweet, bitter, and savory flavors, the so-called type 2 cells, turn over incredibly fast with a half-life of only about 8 days.
Conversely, the cells that process sour flavors live much longer, maintaining a half-life closer to 22 days. Consider the implications of that timeline. The fast-turning cells are the hungry ones. They are reborn constantly, which makes them magnificent when resources are plentiful, but they are the very first to suffer the moment supplies run short. Now, compare that dynamic against what actually diminishes as we grow older because not all taste sensations fade at the same rate. Large-scale studies are quite clear on this point. A paper in the journal, Nutrients, in 2018, which examined over 1,000 adults ranging from age 18 to 80, discovered that overall taste perception measurably drops with age. Furthermore, earlier work summarized in the journal Science noted a much sharper trend. Salt sensitivity slips slightly, but the bitter response in particular can drop profoundly. Now, tell me, what is the dominant flavor profile in a standard cup of black coffee? It is bitter, accompanied by a rich, savory depth underneath. Those are precisely the notes carried by the fast turnover cells, the 8-day cells, which are the most exposed when the loading dock slows its operations. That is why your coffee tastes flat. It is not a random occurrence. It is the exact place you would expect to notice a supply disruption because bitter flavors rely on the most vulnerable cells you possess. Your morning cup is essentially serving as an early warning light on your physical dashboard. While most people interpret it as a sign to buy better coffee, it is actually communicating something about the back of the bakery. If a clear, calm walk through your own biology is the kind of content you have been missing, consider subscribing as we explore one mechanism deeper every week to see how they connect. Now, let us examine the loading dock itself. The ovens are perfectly fine and renew every couple of weeks, so if the bread is emerging flat, the issue stems from the deliveries. It turns out there are two specific ingredients this bakery absolutely cannot function without. The first critical ingredient is vitamin A. The underlying mechanism is beautifully simple once you visualize it. The opening at the apex of every taste bud is a tiny pore, a microscopic doorway that permits dissolved flavor in your food and drink to reach the sensory cells waiting inside. For that doorway to operate correctly, the surrounding surface tissue must remain soft, moist, and properly formed. That vital maintenance job depends directly on vitamin A. When vitamin A levels run low, the tissue undergoes a specific transformation. It begins laying down keratin, which is the same tough protein that comprises your fingernails and the calluses on your heels right across the surface. The medical term for this process is keratinization, and what it does is seal a thin, waxy film directly over the taste pore. Returning to our bakery analogy, the pore is the vent on the oven that allows the aroma to escape, and keratin acts as a sheet of wax paper sealing that vent shut. The bread is still baking inside, but you can no longer taste or smell it because the doorway has been filmed over. This is not a theory pulled out of thin air. Classic research cataloged in the National Library of Medicine, including studies on vitamin A deficiency and taste, demonstrated exactly this: keratin infiltrating the pores of the taste buds and dulling the sensory signal. The encouraging half of that same research shows that when vitamin A levels were restored, taste perception returned toward normal. Keep that in mind because that recovery is the entire reason we are discussing this today. So that covers delivery number 1. There is a second essential ingredient required at the loading dock. The second ingredient is zinc, and zinc functions through a specific protein you have almost certainly never heard of before. It is called gustin. Gustin is the primary zinc-containing protein found within your saliva, also scientifically known as carbonic anhydrase 6, and your taste buds genuinely depend on its presence. Gustin is tied directly to the healthy growth, shape, and physical development of the buds themselves. When your body runs low on zinc, you produce less gustin, and when gustin levels drop, the taste buds fail to form correctly. Under the microscope, researchers have observed the buds of zinc-deficient individuals become vacuolated and degenerated, meaning they appear swollen, hollowed out, and malformed. The signal emanating from a misshapen taste bud is weak, or even worse, completely distorted. This distortion explains why some individuals do not just lose their sense of taste, but instead notice a strange metallic edge attached to everything they eat. That specific flavor distortion has a medical name too, dysgeusia, which simply means an altered sense of taste. The condition of experiencing reduced taste overall is known as hypogeusia, with hypo meaning low and geusia meaning taste, and zinc deficiency stands as one of its best documented causes. Now, here is the data I want you to actually consider. A systematic review and meta-analysis published in the Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism in 2023 compiled controlled trials on this topic and found that in individuals whose taste loss was driven by low zinc, zinc supplementation successfully helped restore it. Other clinical summaries place the recovery timeline at roughly 2 to 4 weeks before individuals begin noticing a tangible difference. That 2 to 4 week window is not a coincidence. That is almost exactly the duration it takes your internal bakery to produce 1 or 2 fresh batches of taste buds with the proper ingredients finally back on the dock. So consider the narrative we have constructed. Coffee tastes flat, the tongue gets blamed, but the buds actually renew every 2 weeks and the ovens are perfectly fine. The fast cells that carry bitter and savory notes are simply the first to falter, and they falter because two crucial deliveries have slowed down: vitamin A, which keeps the doorway open, and zinc, which builds the protein the buds are structured around. We have traced the cold draft all the way back to the open window. However, there is one last link in the chain, and it answers the only question left. Why would those two deliveries slow down for you now after years of being perfectly fine?
This is the real root cause, and it is the reason this is an interconnected chain rather than just a quick tip about taking pills. The slowdown usually is not occurring on your plate. Instead, it is happening at the loading dock of absorption within your body. Several changes shift within the digestive system during your 60s and 70s, and each one quietly skims a little off the top of the nutrition you consume. For instance, stomach acid production tends to decline with age, and you require adequate stomach acid to free up minerals like zinc from your food. Additionally, appetite often shrinks as the years pass, so the variety of food on the plate narrows, and variety is exactly where trace minerals tend to hide. Many common long-term medications, some prescribed for blood pressure, some for acid reflux, and others for the heart, are known to interfere directly with taste or with mineral status. Furthermore, the body's ability to handle and process vitamin A can become less efficient over time as well. When you put it all together, you get a person who is eating more or less the same diet as always, while less and less of the nutritional cargo actually makes it through the intestinal door. That is precisely why this issue gets overlooked so frequently. Nobody is starving and the food is going in, but the unloading process has failed. That realization is genuinely good news because a delivery problem is a fixable problem, far more fixable than a worn-out tongue, which was never the correct diagnosis in the first place. Before I outline exactly what to do about it, I need to stop and be completely honest with you about when this explanation does not apply. Taste is an area where your body sends genuine warning signs, so please listen to this part carefully. If your taste changes suddenly overnight or over the course of just a few days, that is not the slow supply story I have just described, and it requires a doctor rather than a grocery list. If the change occurs on only one side of your mouth, that is a warning sign. If the taste loss arrives alongside numbness, weakness, drooping on one side of the face, trouble speaking, or a severe headache, treat that as a medical emergency and seek help immediately. A persistent metallic taste, a taste change that initiated right after starting a new medication, or any loss that continuously worsens deserves a real medical evaluation. Taste loss can be tied to neurological conditions, medication side effects, dental or sinus issues, and occasionally to conditions that are serious. None of those situations get solved by eating pumpkin seeds. Let me offer one more line of caution because I would rather you trust my advice than have me flatter you. Do not go pour a high-dose zinc supplement down your throat on your own. Consuming too much zinc over an extended period can drive down your copper levels and create its own set of health problems. Moreover, if you are taking regular medications, some of this requires a conversation with your clinician first, including a simple blood test, to see whether you are actually deficient before you treat yourself as if you are.
The completely honest version of this entire video is this: the deficiency-driven portion of taste loss is often reversible, but the part that stems from a genuine structural drop in the total number of taste buds is not fully reversible. It can be slowed down and worked around, but it cannot be entirely erased. I am going to help you win back the portion of your taste you can win back, but I'm not going to promise you the part you cannot. With all of that said, here is the recommended daily routine, which you can think of as restocking the loading dock and clearing the doorway. Food comes first. For zinc, the richest dietary sources are oysters by a wide margin, followed by red meat and poultry. On the plant side, you can look to pumpkin seeds, cashews, lentils, chickpeas, and beans. One practical trick if you consume a lot of whole grains and legumes, soaking or sprouting them, and pairing them with a little animal protein or vitamin C-rich food, helps free the zinc for absorption because the natural phytic compounds in those foods can otherwise lock it up. You are not just eating zinc, you are ensuring it gets through the door. For vitamin A, you have two distinct dietary pathways. The direct form, called preformed vitamin A or retinol, is found in eggs, dairy, and especially liver. Even a small amount of liver once in a while is remarkably nutrient-dense. The alternative pathway is beta-carotene, which your body converts into vitamin A, and it is found in deep orange and dark green vegetables like sweet potatoes, carrots, butternut squash, spinach, and kale. Here is the detail that truly matters. Those carotenes require a little fat to absorb correctly. Therefore, the carrots need a drizzle of olive oil, the spinach should be cooked with a fat source, and the sweet potato wants real butter. Eat them dry and you leave most of the nutrients on the plate. Now, let us discuss physical practices, the exercises in the sense of things you actually do rather than just eat. Start by cleaning the doorway. Gently brushing or scraping your tongue once a day clears away the layer of debris and film sitting over those pores, which is the cheapest possible way to help dissolved flavor reach the cells. Next, protect your saliva by sipping water throughout the day, especially if your mouth runs dry because taste literally cannot function in an arid environment. The flavor compounds must be dissolved in saliva to be sensed at all. Then slow down your eating pace and chew your food thoroughly. Chewing releases more of the volatile flavor compounds and grants them adequate time to reach the taste buds, whereas wolfing food down skips that process entirely. Give your conscious attention back to the act of tasting as well. There is good reason to believe that intentionally paying attention to flavor, sipping slowly, naming the notes you notice, and alternating a sip of coffee with a sip of water to reset your palate keeps the entire sensory system more engaged. Finally, stop scalding your buds. Drinking beverages painfully hot and smoking both blunt the system over time, so letting the coffee cool slightly and cutting out smoke work in your favor.
Ultimately, the piece of advice I cannot emphasize enough is to take your medication list and this question to your clinician. Ask plainly, could any of the medications I am currently taking be dulling my sense of taste, and should we check my zinc levels? That single sentence uttered at your next appointment may accomplish more than everything else combined. So if you begin this protocol tomorrow, what exactly happens, and in what specific order? The chain reverses itself in stages rather than all at once. The doorway moves first. Tongue cleaning, proper hydration, and getting vitamin A flowing again all work directly on that thin keratin film covering the pore, because the fast receptor cells refresh in about 8 days. This is the layer that can begin to lift first, sometimes within the initial couple of weeks. The early sign is small and specific. Coffee tastes a touch more bitter again, and food seems to possess distinct edges it had previously lost. Do not dismiss that change. That is the volume dial turning back up. The signal strength moves next, and that is where the zinc and gustin story comes into play. The research timeline of roughly 2 to 4 weeks is your honest expectation here, not days and not overnight, but rather the time required for a couple of batches of fresh buds to be built around protein that finally has its required zinc. This is the stage where if a metallic distortion was bothering you, it tends to settle down. Then there is the slow part, the aspect I promised to be completely straight with you about. The genuine age-related drop in the sheer quantity of taste buds plateaus rather than snapping back to youthful levels. However, here is the reality worth sitting with. Most people are nowhere near their true structural floor. Most individuals are walking around with a correctable supply problem stacked on top of their natural aging process, and that supply layer is the exact one you can actually lift. Clear that nutritional bottleneck, and the difference is often far larger than people anticipate from something as ordinary as a cup of coffee tasting like itself again. Now, I want to hear from you because your feedback genuinely shapes how I explain the next topic. Tell me your current decade in the comments, whether you are in your 60s, 70s, or 80s. Some of these biological mechanisms shift significantly after age 70, when stomach acid and nutrient absorption change more drastically, and I tailor my writing depending on who is actually in the room, so drop your decade below. I read them. Here's where I want to leave you today. The next time your morning coffee tastes flat, I do not want you to automatically reach for a darker roast or quietly conclude that your sense of taste is permanently gone. I want you to remember the bakery analogy. The ovens are still perfectly good, and the recipe never changed. 2 crucial deliveries just got thin, and you now know exactly which 2 where the doorway is located and how long the bread takes to come back full. That is a much better place to stand than assuming it is just your age. It was never just your age, it was a chain and you just walked the whole thing.